Every Canadian needs to hear this. Everyone. There's a strange kind of energy in the air when a country feels cornered, like everyone's just a little bit more awake, a little more tuned into what's at stake. That's honestly how I felt watching Mark Carney step up for this interview with Toronto Life. It was not a campaign rally, not a dry political lecture, just to sit down one-on-one with Toronto Life's editor, right at the moment when Canada's nerves are exposed and the world seems like it's coming undone at the seams. And it's not just the headlines, though sure, the headlines are super loud right now, but it's the undercurrent, the US lurching between chaos and swagger, Trump tossing out never say ever about annexing Canada like it's some sort of a punchline. And meanwhile, people here are quietly wondering, could it actually happen? Would anyone stop it? So when Carney gives this interview, it's not just a media appearance. It feels more like a moment, a pulse check on what Canadians actually want and what they're willing to defend. You can see it in the way Carney talks about sovereignty, about identity, about not just surviving, but defining yourself in the shadow of a giant next door. It's more emotional than I expected, honestly, but more hopeful too. I'll be honest, I'm not Canadian, but watching this, it kind of made me wish that I was, because here is a leader in a time of real turmoil, quietly insisting we're not for sale and we're not backing down. Maybe that's the message people needed to hear. Not just in Canada, but anywhere that small countries sit in the shadow of a bigger, louder one. So in this video, I want to walk through what Carney said, why it matters, and what it means for anyone who cares about sovereignty in general, Canadian or not. We'll break down these following big themes: why this is not just another Trump moment, but a crossroads for Canada, how Carney's never, never, ever quote is more than just a soundbite, and where this leaves the rest of us looking in from the outside, hoping that when push comes to shove, a country will stand up for itself and maybe even inspire a few other ones along the way. If you've got thoughts on sovereignty, annexation, or just what it means for a country to know who it is, drop a comment below. And if you're feeling what I'm feeling, a little anxious, but honestly a little hopeful as well, do let me know in the comments below where you're watching from and how you're feeling about this whole saga. Before we jump in, just a quick personal note. If the whole sovereignty question is hitting you harder than usual, or if you've ever felt like it's getting harder to tell what's true in this noise-heavy politics as theater world, I really get it. I wrote a book about this exact feeling, about staying grounded and clear-headed when powerful countries and leaders start pushing their own versions of reality. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies. If you've been craving a little bit more clarity, especially at moments like this when it really matters, I think you'll find something in there for you. You'll find the book in the launch video link below. There's also a subscriber discount, so if you're interested, make sure you're subscribed and check out the link for further details. All right, back to Carney and this wild moment for Canada.
President Trump is the self-described master of the art of the deal. You, having spent decades in the private sector, are no stranger to the art of negotiation yourself. Having been up close to Mr. Trump many times now, how would you characterize his negotiating skills?
Well, I mean, he's a good negotiator. And then you're taking a good negotiator who is negotiating from a position of strength.
Sure.
So in his time in the private sector, he was one of many developers and he had skill, et cetera. When you're president of the United States, the world's military superpower, hyperpower in many respects, the largest, most dynamic economy, and you inherit a series of very tight relationships with your major trading partners, and you're negotiating changes in those, you're starting from a very strong position. So, and then you throw on top of that someone who has very good, lots of negotiating experience, but skills, and part of those skills is an ability to identify the points of maximum leverage and a willingness to exploit that. So it takes some patience. It takes an ability to open up different avenues of that negotiation, and that's what we have been doing. We're not going to sign a bad deal. We're not even going to sign a good deal. We're going to sign a great deal for Canada, with one very important point of context, which is our relationship with the United States, as is the case with everyone else in the world, has fundamentally changed. And we recognize that. We've recognized that from the start. We were in a process of a long period that started in the mid-1980s, where from the first free trade agreement with the U.S., where Canada and the U.S. were coming closer and closer together. That process is over, okay? So we are in a position where our deal, our current deal with the United States, and we do have a deal with the United States, is the best deal of any country in the world. It's not as good as it was. It won't get back to what it was, because that we've learned a lesson as Canadians of the dangers, the downside of that close integration. But our situation can be better than it is today, and that's what we're negotiating hard for.
Now, this is a critical moment. You can actually hear it in Carney's voice. There's no attempt to gloss things over, no pretending that it's just business as usual with the US. It almost feels like we're listening in on the end of an era. Not long ago, there was this widespread, almost innocent belief that the US and Canada would just keep drawing closer, shared values, open markets, one big North American family, beautiful. But Carney lays it out plainly this time that that chapter is closed. For anyone who grew up believing in the myth of a special relationship, or who bought into the easy confidence of globalization, this lands like a cold splash of water. Carney is not hostile here, but he is clear-eyed. He knows the risk of leaning too hard on a neighbor who doesn't always have your back, especially when that neighbor's leader is perfectly willing to use power for leverage, no matter who gets squeezed. It's a kind of politics that's honestly a little jarring if you're used to Canada's traditional deference or diplomatic niceties. There's a sense here of stepping out of America's shadow and waking up to the hard math of the moment. But what strikes me most is how Carney frames the opportunity in all of this. He is not just defending the status quo, he's setting a higher bar. There's almost a quiet pride when he says, we're not going to sign a bad deal. We're not even going to sign a good deal. We're going to sign a great deal for Canada. Now that is a mindset shift. It's not about just keeping up or surviving, but actually raising expectations for what's possible, pushing for something better, even in the face of American pressure. And honestly, I think this is hopeful, because if a country can recognize the end of old illusions and still double down on its own strength, that is not just resilience, my friends, that is growth. It's the kind of attitude that makes me want to root for Canada, even as an outsider. This moment is bigger than one negotiation or one leader. It's a turning point for how Canada sees itself on the world stage. But for all the talk about tough negotiations and shifting alliances, there is one moment that really crystallizes just how firm Carney is willing to be. Let's take a listen.
Is the relationship going? How do we find areas where it does make sense to collaborate our two countries and economies, and that's what we work towards. Look, the president, he respects straight talk and understanding what our objectives are, and the consequence of that has been that we are in a position where 85% of our trade is still tariff-free. We have the lowest average tariff of any country in the world. We do have some issues which we're working through, I find the best way to address those issues is to make sure we're talking, we're in the game, we're playing the game, and that's what we're doing right now.
The relationship in the Oval Office is complicated. You need to not offend him. We saw what happened at Zelensky. But at the same time, he hates being called Donald, but he calls you Mark. He
calls me president, actually. Call me president.
I'm just, that's true.
Yeah. So
he does call you Mark, and he contorts.
The last time he called me president. I just want that on the record. Okay.
He twists empirical data. He mocks our nation. And so my question is, how challenging is it for you to sit and hold your tongue in many situations for the greater good?
Well, I'm in his environment, the Oval Office, and he has literally 75 press people there, maybe 10% of whom are from Canada in the case when I'm there, maybe a little more than that, but not much more. And he's basically speaking to those individuals. And a substantial proportion of the time about issues that have nothing to do with Canada, domestic issues, and that's the nature of it. So I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to interfere with the domestic issues. That's first. And then secondly, with respect to Canada, I think you do see in those settings a respect that we expected for Canada. Yeah. We are not the state there. He wishes that we would be part of the United States. Lots of people want to come to Canada. We have the evidence here in Toronto. Lots of people want to be Canada. It's true around the world, one of the most admired countries. In fact, in many surveys, the most admired country in the world. And I'm sure there's lots of places that would like to have Canada, but they can't. And as I said in the Oval Office, when he said, never say never, I said, never, never, never. So it's clear. All kidding aside, it's clear.
It's the never, never, ever line that immediately snaps my focus here. The context is almost surreal. Carney sitting in the Oval Office face to face with the US president who's not shy about pushing boundaries, who openly muses about absorbing Canada, and who doesn't mind bending facts or lobbying a few insults. That kind of situation would make almost anyone squirm, and it's not hard to imagine other leaders trying to charm, flatter, or just keep the peace. But Carney doesn't even blink. He listens, he holds the room, and then with almost casual certainty, he draws the line, never, never, ever. It's a defiant thing, yes, but also deeply self-assured, like he's channeling the quiet resolve of an entire country in one sentence. There's something about how he says it that's less about bravado and more about boundaries. Not never as in maybe someday, but never as in this is a non-negotiable thing and you should know better than to even ask. In a political moment that's full of ambiguity and hedging, that kind of clarity is almost electric. What I find so powerful here is the way that Carney flips the narrative. Trump can bluster all he wants, but Canada isn't some sidekick waiting for permission to exist. The whole exchange makes you realize that national dignity doesn't always have to look like saber rattling or chest thumping. Sometimes it's just a steady refusal to be rattled at all, a kind of calm, principled stubbornness that says, you can want what you want, but this is our home, it's not for sale, and it never will be. I don't think he said this as a line for the headlines. I think he said it as a signal to Canadians, to Americans, and honestly to anyone watching from the sidelines, that small countries don't have to be defined by the ambition of the bigger ones. They can draw their own lines, and at a time when so many borders and norms seem up for debate, Carney's answer is both a relief and a rallying cry. If there was ever a moment to be proud of Canadian leadership, this is it, I think. Still, in a previous video just the other day, we explored at length how the USA might actually gain influence over Canada without full annexation and tanks at the border. I encourage you to check it out as well. But yeah, never. And after all of that, after the sharp lines, the tough talks, and the boundary setting, Carney pivots in a way that feels almost philosophical, which I definitely like. He starts looking ahead, not just to the next negotiation or headline, but to the big question. What kind of country is Canada actually trying to become?
Who knows? Speaking in brevity, who knows how long you have on this earth or in office on this earth. And so, what does it look like? I think that the country is in the process of realizing just how great it can be. It is the greatest country in the world, but we can be even greater still. And so, however period of time that I'm in this role, that we're doing things that build a stronger country. We're giving ourselves more than the Americans are taking away. We're on that process. And we're taking care of ourselves, safer communities, and we're taking care of each other.
There's something quietly moving about the way Carney zooms out here. He admits nobody really knows how much time they have in power, or on this earth for that matter, unfortunately. Instead of using that uncertainty as an excuse to play it safe, he leans into it, focusing on legacy, impact, and growth. What he's describing, in my view, isn't just a list of policies or a checklist of promises, but it's more of a mindset, no? Canada is already great, sure, but it can always be greater. And getting there means making real investments, not just in infrastructure or the economy, but in the people who need it the most. What I love about this is how it refuses to settle for easy answers or comforting myths. Carney's talking about tough choices, yes, but also about protecting the values that make Canada worth defending in the first place. He's clear that generosity, care for the vulnerable, and real community are not luxuries, they're the foundation. That means re-examining assumptions, adapting when circumstances change, and sometimes holding two truths in mind at once: pride in what's been accomplished and humility about how much further there is to go. Honestly, this whole outlook feels like an invitation to stay awake, to keep questioning, to keep thinking critically, and to never just take the headlines or the easy narratives at face value, especially in times like these when the pressure to pick a side, simplify, or tune out is stronger than ever. It's a reminder that real progress comes from digging deeper, challenging your own biases, and staying curious about what actually matters. In the end, Carney's hopefulness is not naive in my view, but it's earned. It comes from looking clearly at the world as it is, but refusing to give up on the world as it could be. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Countries, like people, grow stronger not by closing their eyes to risk or conflict, but by facing it with open eyes and an open mind and really robust analysis. If you've ever wondered how to keep your head clear when the noise is loudest, this is a pretty good place to start in my view. So that's where things stand, at a moment that's tense, uncertain, but honestly kind of inspiring, right? Carney's never, never, ever line is not just about borders or bluster, but about holding firm to your values even when the pressure is on. And the vision he lays out for Canada is not about pretending things are perfect, but about building something stronger, together and with eyes wide open. But I'm still really curious about what you think. When you see a leader draw a hard line on sovereignty, does it make you feel more hopeful or more nervous? Do you think it's possible for a country to stay generous and open, but also defend itself when it matters? Let me know in the comments below. A huge part of making these videos is hearing your perspectives, especially when you challenge me or each other to think deeper. And just a quick reminder, if you want to go further on this whole idea of clear thinking in messy times, I wrote this book, Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies. If you ever feel overwhelmed by noise, spin, or just want a little more clarity in your daily life, I think you'll find it very helpful. Subscribers get a special discount. The details are right below this video. Thanks for hanging out with me for this one. If you like the conversation, consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. See you next time.